families, creating a lifetime of memories. Sadly, some families are denied these important moments due to the sad practice of alienation. These are families divided.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Families Divided TV. Our guest for this segment is Dr. Don Hubin. He is the president of National Parent Organization. He'll be speaking with us on the subject, is shared parenting a magic bullet against parental alienation? That's a great subject and a great question, and he's giving us much information in this segment. So I hope you'll pay close attention. He'll be with us right after these messages.
Divorce and co-parenting are a major life interruption for families, especially the kids, but also for parents and grandparents. And it's even worse in blame-filled, high-conflict cases. When parents engage in alienation by turning the kids against the other parent or grandparents, kids suffer. They're denied the opportunity to build the 4 big skills necessary for future resilience. New Ways for Families online class can help. Parents learn to use our popular BIF and EAR skills to calm the conflict and stop the hostile emails and texts. And we even have a class for kids and parents to learn together. Research shows a 75% improvement in joint parental decision-making after this course is taken, plus overall improvements for kids' well-being. Don't wait to make this affordable investment in your children's future and improve your well-being too. Start learning new ways for your family today at conflictplaybook.com.
Hi, I'm Don Hubin, Chair of National Parents Organization. I want to talk today about the connection between shared parenting and parental alienation. But first, let me say just a little bit about myself and about National Parents Organization. In addition to being the chair of National Parents Organization, I am a professor emeritus of philosophy at The Ohio State University, and I'm the founding director emeritus of the Ohio State University Center for Ethics and Human Values. And maybe most importantly, and maybe most relevant to today's talk, I'm the father of 3, the stepfather of 2, and the grandfather of 5 at this point. National Parents Organization is the nation's largest and most effective shared parenting organization. We have chapters in 27 states now, and we work with state-based organizations in those states and in other states to promote shared parenting. I describe NPO as a child-focused, research-based organization. And I mean by that we ground our advocacy for shared parenting on the best research available about child well-being. So I provocatively named my talk today, Is Shared Parenting a Magic Bullet Against Parental Alienation? And spoiler alert, the answer is no, of course not. There is no magic bullet against parental alienation. If there were, this problem would have been solved a long time ago. But what I want to emphasize today is that shared parenting and legal presumptions of shared parenting are part of our best strategy for combating parental alienation. How prevalent is parental alienation? Well, researchers estimate that between 11 and 15% of divorces involving children lead to parental alienation. And with more than 1 million children experiencing the divorce of their parents each year in the US, that means somewhere between 110,000 and 150,000 children become victims of parental alienation each year. And that's just counting the ones that happen through divorce, not the ones that are just separated parents who are living together. So it's quite prevalent. It's quite a serious, has quite a serious impact on America's children. So what are the effects of parental alienation on children? Well, parental alienation is a form of psychological abuse. Teaching hatred of the targeted parent creates the basis for self-hatred in the child in two different ways. The first way is this: the child will feel rejected by the targeted parent, and the child may internalize that and wonder why they're not good enough to have the love and affection of the targeted parent. The second way is this: children often have characteristics of both of their parents. And if the alienating parent criticizes the targeted parent, the child will sometimes find similar characteristics in him or herself to the targeted parent, and that can provide the basis for self-hatred. Child victims of parental alienation experience disruptions in their social emotional development, lack of trust in relationships, and difficulty developing long-term committed relationships, social anxiety, social isolation. Child victims of parental alienation are more likely to be truant from school, to leave school early, to be unemployed as adults, to abuse alcohol and drugs. They'll enter partnerships early, though those partnerships aren't stable. They're more likely to become divorced, and they're more likely themselves to be alienated from their own children. So those are some of the effects of parental alienation on the children who are victims of it. But the targeted parent is also a victim of this. And targeted parents experience grief, severe depression, anxiety, inability to focus, job loss, economic costs of litigation as they spend money trying to maintain their relationship with their child, social isolation, self-loathing if they internalize these critical comments, and an increased likelihood of self-harm. In one study, 23% of targeted parents reported having attempted suicide, not just thought about it, but attempted suicide. So that's a brief overview of parental alienation, what it is, how you diagnose it, what the effects are, and how extensive it is. What about shared parenting? Well, shared parenting involves two elements. The first is what lawyers call legal custody. That means the decision-making responsibility with respect to the children. So, deciding what school they'll go to, what religion they'll be raised in, if any, what medical treatment they'll get, and at what point they'll get that treatment, and so forth. Making decisions in the best interest of the children. The second is physical custody. That's really where the child's living, who the child is living with. Shared parenting involves joint legal custody and shared physical custody. And equal shared parenting, which I'll mention a few times later on, refers to an arrangement where the parents have joint legal custody and substantially equal parenting time, physical custody. The children live with each of the parents roughly the same amount of time. Why does shared parenting matter? Well, shared parenting is a win-win-win arrangement, and we have lots of evidence to support this. It's better for dads because when dads are marginalized in their children's life, that affects their health. And one surprising and important statistic is that divorced fathers are 10 times as likely to commit suicide as divorced mothers. And I think it's not coincidental that they're also 10 times less likely to get custody of their children if it's a sole custody arrangement. Maybe surprisingly, shared parenting is a win for moms too, because the flip side of one parent being marginalized in the children's life is that the other parent is overburdened. Equally shared parenting allows both parents some downtime away from the kids. And anyone who's raised kids knows that along with all the joys and satisfaction of raising kids, there are trials, and it can be difficult and challenging. And being a single parent is hard. So having time when the children are with the other parent is really important for recharging your batteries, for pursuing further education or taking on more job responsibilities, things that are better for both parents in the long run to be able to do. But most importantly, shared parenting is better for children. And we have 40 years, at least, of research now that shows that shared parenting is best for kids. In the vast majority of cases, children raised in a shared parenting situation do as well on every metric of child well-being as children raised in a sole custody, I'm sorry, in an intact marriage. And they do much better than children raised in a sole custody arrangement. So shared parenting is really important, and it's best for all the parties involved. There's a myth about shared parenting that I want to dispel. You sometimes hear people say, well, shared parenting is great if it was a happy divorce. I haven't seen many happy divorces. Most of them are really challenges for people. People go through a lot of negative emotions. They go through fear, they go through anger, they go through humiliation, they go through depression and so forth. Divorce is a very rough time for everyone involved. And the situation in which divorced parents or parents who have lived together for a long time and are separated get together every week and have a cup of coffee and talk about the kids, that's exceedingly rare. Fortunately, the research shows that that's not the only arrangement in which shared parenting works best for children. So even if the parents don't really get along, even if the parents don't both agree to shared parenting originally, even if the parents have different views about how to raise children, the shared parenting is still better for children. And some of the differences that parents have about raising children really just don't matter. They're just below the bar of what matters. If there are somewhat different rules in mom's house and dad's house, kids get that right away. It doesn't confuse kids, even from an early age. They understand the difference between the rules that apply at school and the rules that apply at home. And the rules that might apply at grandma and grandpa's house when they visit might be different from the rules that apply in mom and dad's house. And they very quickly understand that there can be different rules in different houses. Those differences don't need to be ironed out. There are disagreements that do need to be ironed out. And often those can be ironed out through counseling, through mediation and arbitration if the parents can't handle it on their own. And when they are, shared parenting works fine, even though both parents are not collaborating on every decision affecting the children. They talk to one another when there's an important event in the children's life, if there's a serious problem in school, if there's a medical issue, something like that. But otherwise, they engage in what researchers call parallel parenting. Now, sometimes there are irreconcilable disagreements under joint legal custody. And some of those disagreements call for special shared parenting arrangements. If it's not possible for the parents to resolve some conflict over a serious issue like medical care for the children or education or something like that, if they can't resolve that using alternative dispute resolution mechanisms like mediation and arbitration, then courts might use what I call a spheres of responsibility approach. For example, they might say, well, this parent has the final say in medical decisions, and this other parent has the final say in the religious upbringing. I've seen courts do this many times. In one case, mom was a nurse, and there were disagreements over medical care, and the court said mom should be the final say. She needs to consult with dad. They need to try to work it out and come to an agreement, but if they can't, she has the final say on medical issues. But dad has the final say. I think actually in that case, it was on school placement issues. So even where you pursue a spheres of responsibility approach to handle irresolvable conflicts, you're still recognizing that both parents are responsible decision makers for their children. And it encourages cooperation, because if one parent has the final say in one area and then the other parent has a final say in another area, each parent has an incentive to try to cooperate because they want the other parent to cooperate with them in the issue that they have the final say in. So the spheres of responsibility approach can be a good way of handling irresolvable conflicts between parents. So I said I was going to talk about the ways in which shared parenting combats parental alienation. And let's talk first about joint legal custody. Remember, that's the decision-making responsibility that parents have for their children. And recall that one of the alienating behavior categories that Dr. Baker listed was undermining the authority of the targeted parent. This is relatively easy for a custodial parent to do in a sole custody arrangement, because in a sole custody arrangement, the custodial parent has the final say on everything. and can say, it doesn't matter what your other parent says. They don't have any say in this. In a typical joint legal custody arrangement, both parents retain decision-making responsibility with respect to the children, the same decision-making responsibility they had when they were married. And let me take a moment here to digress for just a second. You often hear when people talk about custody decisions, the phrase an award of custody, like someone is getting something. But when two parents divorce, when they walk into the courtroom, they both have legal custody of their children. They both have the authority to make judgments for their children in their children's best interest. If the court awards sole custody, when they walk out of that courtroom, only one of them has that. No one has gained any parental rights. One person has lost parental rights. It's not an award of custody, it's a deprivation of custody. And it's something that doesn't happen in shared parenting. Both parents retain the decision-making responsibility for the children that they had when they were married. Even when the court pursues a strategy of the spheres of responsibility, dividing the responsibility between the parents on different topics, they're still both recognized as responsible decision-making parents for the children. And so it's harder for one parent to undermine the authority of the other parent. So that's how joint legal custody can address the issue of parental alienation. What about physical custody? Well, here, remember that one of the categories of alienating behavior is limiting the contact and communication between the child and the targeted parent. In a sole custody arrangement, that is easier. One parent typically will see the children only every other weekend and one evening a week. And it's easy for a custodial parent, if he or she chooses, to say, well, the kids have a lot of homework tonight, they can't go to dinner with you this time, or the kids have some special thing this weekend, they can't see you, and they can limit that time. In a shared parenting arrangement, the kids have roughly equal time. In an equal shared parenting arrangement, they have close to equal time with each of the parents, and it's much more difficult for one parent to limit the communication and contact with the other parent. There's another way that shared physical custody helps. Remember that another category of alienating behaviors is issuing poisonous messages to the child about the targeted parent, portraying that parent as being uncaring or unsafe, unloving, unavailable to the child. In a shared parenting arrangement, the children have sufficient time with each parent to form their own strong relationship directly with that parent. They're assured that by their own experience, that both of the parents are available to them. Both of them are taking a hands-on role in raising them. And their understanding of each parent's motivations and actions isn't presented only through the lens of the other parent. So by providing this direct relationship between the children and the parent in a real parent-child relationship, you make it much more difficult for someone to distort and misrepresent the motives and intentions of the other parent. So far, I've just talked about how shared parenting can help to combat parental alienation. What about the legal presumption of shared parenting? We often hear people say, sure, shared parenting is great, but there should be no legal presumptions. Courts should just do whatever they think is best in the individual case. But assurances matter. When people go into divorce court, usually it's their first time there, and maybe their first real experience with the law, other than perhaps getting a traffic ticket or something like that. And they're frightened because they're worried that they're going to lose their relationship with their child, which is the most precious thing they have. And that lack of assurance that they will continue to be a full and fully engaged parent to their child provokes some people to bad behavior. They engage in a campaign to alienate the children from the other parent because they're so afraid of losing the relationship that they have with their children. Presumptions of equal shared parenting help to alleviate that fear. As one parent described to me, he actually said, he was a psychologist actually, he said, it's not just fear, it's terror. It's something that strikes at the very heart of a person to think that this relationship they have with their child, what they value really most in life, is something that may be seriously degraded or destroyed as a result of a bad custody decision. So it's important to combat parental alienation when it arises, and there are ways to do that. We need to educate parents about and divorce professionals about what parental alienation is, what the harms of it are, how to recognize it early on, and how to address it when you recognize that there is a campaign of parental alienation before it begins to really taint the child's perception of the other parent. We need to provide courts with appropriate tools and programs for interventions to minimize the harms of parental alienation. And these can include things like change of custody or parenting time, temporary removal of the child from the care of the offending parent, or the use of family reunification programs that aim to overcome parental alienation. But better than combating parental alienation when it arises is to prevent it from arising in the first place. Now, parent education courses, which are common in most states, attempt to discourage parents from engaging in alienating behaviors. These courses, while well-intentioned, and I've looked at many of these courses, they are well-intentioned. They give good advice typically, but they're clearly not as effective as we might hope. Very often, parents are forced to take it, ignore it, or they pay attention to it, but they think it doesn't really apply to their behaviors. Their behaviors aren't the kind of behaviors that are being cautioned against by these parent education courses, and they go ahead and engage in those alienating behaviors anyway. What I think is an effective tool for addressing parental alienation is for us to reform the norms of separated parenting to make equal shared parenting the norm, and to create a legal presumption of equal shared parenting. Rebuttable, of course, because shared parenting does not work in every case, and no one suggests that it does, but it should be our starting point in deciding how children are going to be raised when the parents have chosen to live apart. What do we mean by reforming the norms of separated parenting? Well, first, and sometimes overlooked, a crucial element is changing parents' expectations. Where there's no domestic violence or abuse or neglect present, parents should go to court asking for, indeed I'd say demanding, and expecting to be given equal shared parenting whenever it's feasible, when the parents live close enough together and those sort of tactical things can be worked out. That should be our norm. And really, if all parents recognize the value of shared parenting, and if they could set aside their anger, their hurt, their fear, etc., and do what's best for their kids, they would go to court and ask for shared parenting, and courts would award it. But not all parents are able to do that. We need to change courts' practices. Courts need to prefer equal shared parenting arrangements and to encourage parents to practice equal shared parenting. They need to really twist the arm of parents who are reluctant to do shared parenting and find out why they're reluctant. Do they have a legitimate reason, or are they just trying to control the situation? Are they really doing what's best for their children, or are they being unable to separate their own interests from their children's interests? And then third, it's changing state laws, because state laws matter. They set up a default arrangement. Every negotiation is done, as every lawyer learns, in the shadow of the law. So if the legal system doesn't give any preference to shared parenting, and if courts routinely award sole custody unless both parents ask for shared parenting, then parents expect to get sole custody. If, on the other hand, the state statutes create a presumption of equal shared parenting, that will change what parents expect, and it'll change court behavior, and it'll change the norms. Shared parenting is supported by the overwhelming majority of people. NPO has commissioned polling by a respected independent polling company in 25 states now. And we've shown that in every single state, there is overwhelming support for shared parenting. In response to the question, do you believe it's in a child's best interest to spend as much time as possible with each parent when the parents are divorced or separated? The lowest positive response rate we've gotten to that was around 82%. Often it's in the 90s, 96%, I think, is the highest we've got. That's stunning. There are not very many things that 96% of Americans agree on, but they agree it's in the best interest of children for them to have as much time as possible with each parent when the parents are living apart. What about legal presumptions of shared parenting? NPO also had our independent polling company ask, would you support a change in your state's laws that creates a rebuttable presumption that shared parenting is in the best interest of a child after parental separation? And again, the numbers are stunning. Over 75%, I think the lowest number here was 78% of respondents said they would support such a change in their state's laws. So the science supports shared parenting, the public supports shared parenting, but legislatures have dragged their feet. Despite the scientific support for it and the public support for it, at this point, only 4 states currently have strong shared parenting, equal shared parenting presumptions. Arizona passed a statute in 2013. It doesn't explicitly say there's a presumption of equal shared parenting, but it says the court shall devise a parenting schedule that maximizes the time the children spend with each parent. And subsequent research has shown that Arizona courts are treating that like a presumption of equal shared parenting, which is quite good. In 2018, Kentucky passed the first explicit equal shared parenting presumption, and it's been extremely successful in Kentucky and very popular with the citizens of Kentucky. And one of the judges in Kentucky that routinely handles divorce and custody cases said about a year or two after this law was passed, like many judges, I was very skeptical about this law when it was passed, but I can honestly say that I love it. It reduces the conflict between parents. It makes it much easier to resolve divorce cases with children. Just last year, Arkansas passed a very strong equal shared parenting law, and West Virginia, just this year, passed a very strong equal shared parenting law. Shared parenting legislation has been introduced in, I think now about 30 states in the past few years. In most states, it gets stalled, and it gets stalled by special interests fighting against it. The special interests usually come in the form of the Bar Association and trial attorneys who oppose presumptions of equal shared parenting.
Join us next week on Families Divided TV when Helen Wheeler will join us to talk about the use of psychological evaluations in domestic court cases.